It's estimated that governments have put in over $10 trillion as stimulus packages. Where is that money going? Is it going into the hands of women or for the benefit of the women in the long term?
COVID-19 is deepening existing inequalities, including gender inequality. Already we are seeing a reversal in decades of limited and fragile progress on gender equality and women's rights.
And I think the key word in there is fragility. So although we've seen that there has been a lot of progress over the years, that progress is always fragile. It's kind of when you have your neck above water, but at any shock or crisis, it can send you below the water. As a result of COVID-19, more women than men are losing their jobs. We know that more women are represented in those sectors that have been the hardest hit by the COVID-19 crisis. I can think of tourism as an example where there's a disproportionate number, a high number of women, so they are more impacted.
So much of the work women do is underpaid and undervalued.
Before the COVID-19 crisis, did we know that there were such high numbers or percentages of women in such crucial or essential work? So COVID-19 really made this more visible to us. Where the work is undervalued, there is overrepresentation. Where it is highly valued, you have underrepresentation of women. And I do want to talk about health workers because there has been a lot said about them and there has been recognition, which is great, but that's not enough. What are we doing about getting them fair wages? What are we doing to make sure that they are safe while they're doing their work? What are we doing to make sure that there's somebody to hold the fort when their children are at home and they are there as essential workers and their spouses, but they are not able to care for their children? Where are the care services? And when they get sick, are we making sure that they have access to proper health care?
Benefits like health insurance, paid sick leave, paid child and family care, and paid parental leave are not luxuries. They are vital to the functioning of our societies.
Women are not being asked about what the issues that they are facing, and they're not involved in decision making. And if we have a different vision of the future, we need to do things differently. Before the crisis, we know that women and girls have a disproportionate burden of care and unpaid work, particularly in households. This has increased because of the crisis, because there's an increased demand for this kind of care work.
Women's unpaid care work has been rising. As millions of girls are out of school, they are at greater risk of being affected by harmful practices, as well as to drop out of school, and we risk another lost generation.
So I think the estimates, according to UNICEF, are that about 743 million girls are out of school at the moment because of COVID-19. And there's actually a staggering number of 222 million girls who do not have access to remote learning. So it means even though they are out of school, they don't have any alternative to school. So this is definitely something that is of concern and something that we all should be worried about.
Since the lockdown, I feel like I didn't learn much because I was not connected online. I don't have any online activities that I'm learning with.
The digital divide is keeping women and girls away from information and education, and this is a sure way of leaving them behind and reversing the modest but important gains we had made in girls' education.
We know that 10% of the world's population is below the poverty line even before the COVID crisis. So that means that they are surviving on $1.9 per day. That's the poverty line. We're talking about almost 200 million women around the world who are living below this poverty line at the very least. When economic pressures and just social pressures increase within a household, within a family, there is a tendency to revert back to these pre-existing practices of early marriage. So as families are dropping below that poverty line and they're making these kinds of choices, it's estimated that over the next 5 years, and Save the Children gives us this number, that an additional 2.5 million girls will be married off early. For example, countries like India, where globally, if we look at all the numbers of child marriage, India accounts for 1 out of every 3. So that's a huge proportion. And what has happened there, although they've been making great progress over the past few years, now with the conditions that with lockdown, and the lockdown happened very quickly, millions of people lost their jobs, the economy contracted by almost 25%. And so the fear is, as a coping strategy, many of the families will look back and go back on those achievements that they've made and force more girls into early marriage.
Without a concerted response, we risk losing a generation or more of gains.
There has been a call from the UN Secretary General, very loud and clear, to all governments to do more on addressing gender-based violence against women and girls, particularly as a result of COVID-19. There are indications that it is on the rise. How to operationalize the work under COVID-19 circumstances. We can work with ministries of social development, but it's also a labor issue, it's a health issue, it's a planning issue, it's a budgeting issue, it's across the board. So we are the coordinators and we bring everybody on board to do that.
The new normal must include the allocation of resources and mobilization of partners that are critical for us to rise up to this occasion and to seize the moment that this crisis presents.